Are we good?
You're good to go? Yeah, excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Hi. We were just lamenting that you aren't all sitting closer together and building community in person. So if you feel like kind of squishing together, please do. I don't know why that just changed. There we go. Okay. So we are here today to help you take your Yammer community from barren to booming in 10 easy steps, but without you having to do any of the work. That's what I know, it's great, right? And we're gonna do a quick couple of introductions here so that you know who we are and the credibility that we have on telling you our stories.
Hi everyone, I'm Kjaer and I'm with Group Analytics. And yeah, I'm probably more the data nerd here, helping you, giving you some numbers that hopefully can help you accelerate your Yammer networks.
Hi, I'm Carrie Basham Young. Is anyone else here from the Bay Area, San Francisco? No. Well, you should come visit us sometime. I run a consultancy called Talk Social to Me, and we help organizations either launch or revamp their Yammer communities and help people learn how to be more engaging and collaborative in them.
And my name's Scott Ward. Work for a company called Digital Infusions down in Australia. I'm very similar to Carrie. We help organisations adopt these tools and technologies to actually drive the outcomes that they care most about.
And we all three are part of a little club of companies that's referred to as Yammer Adoption Specialists, which I think is because Microsoft think we're doing something good. At least that's what we hope.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Most of the time. We don't ever get into trouble. So we are here today to help you probably revive your Yammer network, but again, not doing all the work. We have some credibility in this area. We've all been doing collaboration for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, a lot longer than we'd like to admit. And when it comes to Yammer in particular, we were essentially in the delivery room. It's Yammer's birthday, 10th birthday, right? Woohoo! Happy birthday, Yammer. Cupcakes and happy hour later this evening, I believe. But yeah, we were there when Yammer first came to light. And we've been seeing it, sort of the growing pains, the ups and the downs as it has matured. And we've seen companies sort of work through those challenges and pain points that have come when you've had a Yammer network for what, 10, 8, 5 years. So we've seen it, we've seen things go really well, we've seen things go not so well. And now Yammer is sort of going through this rebirth and this revitalization, and we're really excited that a lot of organizations are taking advantage of it. But we really don't want you to have to do all of the work. No one came here to Ignite to go home and say, I have a really big to-do list, right? You want to be able to help other people in your organization do well. So we're gonna give you 10 easy steps where you can help other people learn to revive Yammer without taking on the work on your own. So I'm gonna kick it over to Scott.
Thank you. So the first thing, realistically, if you are looking to invigorate or build up to go from barren to booming, one of the most important things is you really need to get your leaders involved. Communities without leadership involvement just become these listless, meandering beasts, right? Like they're there, we need them to drive the vision, the conviction that a dream can be achieved and to inspire the power and the energy. So if we don't have them participating, you're not going to get that power, energy or direction from them. So the best way I've found personally to get them involved is to bait the hook, as we say, and to hit them where it really hurts, and that is their wallets. Now, I've tried a number of different ways to engage senior leaders. What I've found realistically is that we need to start to talk to them in terms of the revenue that they're driving, the profit that they've got, or their legacy. Now, preferably, when you're talking to these leaders, what works best, I've found, is if you actually can connect it into things that they're getting their bonus payments for. But if you think about how we structure our organisations, we actually structure it around this sort of model as well. So in revenue, we've got our sales teams, our marketing, our product management. When it comes to profit, it's the domain of the CFO, the COO. It's kind of about efficiencies, those sorts of things. Procurement, it's all about getting more with less. And in terms of legacy, these are the things that help drive our organisation or give our organisations advantage over time. So things like legal, safety, risk, compliance, HR, customer service, these are the things that kind of fall within these barrels. Now, if you're talking to a senior leader in any of those things, it helps you to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve. So if we're talking with the CFO, talking about reducing expenses is going to have their attention. So the next thing that we look at doing is, like, we understand what their main driver is, if it's a profit or revenue driver. Then we look at simply what are the pains that they're experiencing? What are the what are the jobs to be done? And the last one there is like, what is the aspiration? Now, these things go from most effective to least, right? So if you can actually link a pain to that person they're experiencing, maybe the salesperson has missed their targets, and if you can say, you know, we need to boost our targets, why don't we use this amazing tool to drive that outcome? Suddenly it has more chops, right? And it actually has them to do most of the work.
I was just wondering, how many of you guys have senior leaders that are actively involved in your Yammer network? Show of hands. Wow, that's pretty good. How many of you are they not so engaged? Hands up. We start about half of each, isn't it? All right.
Yeah, but to be able to talk in terms of their pain points, their jobs to be done, actually gives it a new context. Nobody buys collaboration. Nobody cares. That's the thing you do. You can kick that down the road for as long as you like. But that pain point around my sales revenue, that has to be addressed today. So the more pertinent, the deeper you can poke that pain, the more likely you are to get them involved. The other thing I recommend in terms of leaders and people in general is being provocative, right? We tend to try and be safe when we come into this space, but actually the highest performing leaders that I've seen are the ones that are provocative, intentionally provocative. And it works with this concept that, you know, and I love this Galileo quote, we can't actually teach anything to people. We need them to realise we need them to realise it within themselves. And being provocative is one of those things that helps draw that knowledge out of people. So this was an example of an organisation. This CEO actually went in and said our brand promise is to be, you know, effortless experience, intuitive service. What do people think? Important or garbage, and why? Now, this CEO, this was the first post they did into the Yammer community, and it was brilliant. They could have gone in and said, I want you to all live up our values, but instead what they've done is, these are our values, are they nonsense or are they true? And what happened was, people came back and said, they're garbage, haven't meant anything for years. Others came back and said, no, these are important for X, Y, Z. But what this person has done is they've lit this fire through the organisation around who are we, what are we about, what's important. So instead of having them bludgeon their people with it or have it written on the wall, they've lifted the awareness within their staff. And this is the thing that we're seeing with these high calibre leaders, is they create this vacuum around the things that are the most important for the organisation, and they allow their people to fill that space for themselves. Another one we saw was this one. I was working with a CFO, large organisation, and his biggest pain point at that point in time was his business units were mismanaging their working capital, and it was sending them broke. It was a lovely pain to push, and I just hammered it on him. So what we did, there were 18 business units. We created this stock market where every business unit was its own listed entity in that market, and their stock price was dependent upon how well they managed their finances. So if they're managing it well, they're at the top and they're this lovely green, but if they're mismanaging their metrics, they're at the bottom, they were this depressing grey. So with this visual friction staring at people. Then what we did was we went out and we found people that were doing cool things to drive more effective practices, and we told their story. And we did that for two reasons. One was to give them the kudos for having done a good job, but the other was about spreading that best practice. Now what happened next was really cool. People started going, guys, we're not at the top of the board, we need to do something. And again, they started to organise themselves to drive more effective practices. We didn't tell them what the solution looked like, right? We got a designer in to design this thing. We uploaded it once a week as a JPEG, so it was totally manual. We gave away a hunk of plastic every 3 months to the people that were at the top of the board, and in the first 12 months, we saved them 23.4 million. But again, it wasn't us whipping them. We just created this vacuum or this space that allowed the network to solve for itself. And that is the way, and being provocative is key to that.
And another part of being provocative, I guess, that one of the roles that we think leaders can play is around asking questions. And Carrie, we talked about this over breakfast, right? And just imagine you're sitting at a dining table. You've invited some of your closest friends over. You're sitting 8 people at home. And just imagine if you said to them, hi everyone, I'm so glad you came. Have you got a question for me? Would that not be an awkward way to start the conversation? Yet this is how we normally do when senior leaders communicate with staff, right? They do their town hall, they say, have you got any questions? And there's always this quietness in the room, is that right? Now, if I'm a good host and I've got people coming to my house, what would I do to get them engaged? I would ask them, how are you? You know, Did you watch the football over the weekend? I would start a conversation. And that's what we think we should get our leaders to do when we're talking about, and when Scott talks about provocative leadership, it's maybe not just asking how was your weekend, but asking things like we got up in here. I'm just going to jump down. See what actually one of them up here is. What's the biggest growth opportunity you see for our company right now? What should we not be doing? What are we spending a ton of time doing that has the least impact? Now, when you ask those quite provocative questions, and there's a senior person asking them, what has that senior leader just done? They've given people permission to speak up. If they said instead, have you got any questions for me? Those things would not be uncovered. So I just put up some of them. What are our competitors doing that you think is great and why? It could be quite provocative. Sometimes, I guess, we've got to make sure that our senior leaders want to hear the answers when you ask those questions. And we have to be able to deal with that feedback when it comes to us. But it's a part of what Scott is talking about, this provocative leadership. Asking questions, good questions that will solicit feedback from the people. So if you're sitting in the room, have a Barren network, go home, take a screenshot of this. There's some more on the blog post I've linked to. There's about 20 questions you can pick from. Just print it out, maybe hand it off to the people that are running the Yammer network and say, well, if you're looking to get some more excitement and some more conversation, why don't you see whether you can get our senior leaders to ask some of these? So a really easy thing to do, but challenging for the senior leaders to take it up. And it'll, I guess, uncover how much sponsorship you have.
Now, that's all well and good. Let's say that your leader has decided, this Yammer thing is cool. People answered my question. People like me. All of a sudden, they decide, Yammer is my personal megaphone. So I want everyone to repeat after me. Yammer is not a megaphone. It is a hearing aid. Yammer is not a megaphone. It is a hearing aid. Excellent. Take that back and remind your leaders of that. So let's say your leaders start coming to you and saying, I'm going to announce every week this and that and the other. I'm going to share all of the articles that I'm finding. I'm going to share this. I'm going to share that. And all of a sudden, it becomes the CEO show or the CHRO show. And employees, we know from countless surveys and engagement reports that they are tired of being inundated with top-down communications. And if leaders don't know what to do, or if they get really excited about engaging with their employees on Yammer, they might start shouting. And one of the things that we like to remind leaders as they are participating is that it's really important for Yammer to be a peer-to-peer conversation network, not your personal internal Twitter account. And that's something that is very hard to coach because they think that everyone really wants to hear what they have to say. Sometimes. One of the things we like to help leaders understand that you can coach any leader in your organization about is that Yammer really helps employees with their intrinsic motivation. Why do I come to work? What makes me feel good at work? What am I learning? What am I giving back? Those kinds of conversations in a peer-to-peer way on Yammer are the strongest thing that can drive engagement. And we know that in organizations where employees feel intrinsically motivated, like their work matters, employees are 32% more committed, 46% more engaged, and 16% more productive than employees who are not engaged at work. Or sorry, not intrinsically motivated at work. So we need to teach comms to stop shouting and start listening on Yammer.
And that has a huge impact. I mean, the ways you can do that. I've got some data I want to show you here that you can take back and share with your senior leaders. And it's really, when you start, if you want to drive that conversation, and I talked about asking questions, when you ask a question, Yammer actually lights up. There will be many, many more replies when you're asking questions. And also when you are mentioning someone. And the point of mentioning is to replicate what we're doing in real life. I might look at Carrie, and the moment I've established that eye contact, that's like mentioning someone. And it's very hard for someone not to engage in a conversation when I say, hey, Carrie, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks, Kai.
But if I just sit like this, hey, everyone, how are you? I haven't actually directed that conversation to anyone. Or even worse, I might say, hi, I'm feeling good. And that's just making a statement. So, another little tip you can take home is how can we coach people in being better at dealing with that hi, I'm feeling good today, sort of one-way statement. And I'd like to remind you or introduce you to this little model, refer, build, engage. And when you see that statement, the first statement you're seeing up here, we just published our 2018 benchmark report. It includes data about asking questions and mentioning. Just a statement. So if you have someone in an organization saying, well, we've got a lot of that happening, what sort of little coaching technique can I give to someone if we're seeing too much of this? Well, what Kylie is doing, she's saying, hey, John, so I'm now recognizing and giving a bit of reward to that person for having seen their post. I'm really interested in that. We have also researched this to show value. And what are we doing now? Saying, I'm just going to say, hey, Sean, do we have something we can share? I'm bringing a third person into that conversation, mentioning them, even asking a question to get them into the conversation. And if you have people over for dinner or go out for lunch, you'll see that this naturally happens in meetings or occasions where we get people together that really have a really nice conversation. And it's those practices we want to take with us online. So when people ask you, how can we make the conversations not so much just announcements and broadcasts, take that little tip with you. Refer, build, engage. It's a very powerful way of making people draw them into conversations online.
And nothing gets people involved in Yammer faster than talking about them.
Now, we always think that the engine room of collaboration is actually in groups. So what we want to talk a bit about is that how do we help group leaders? What is it they need to do?
That's right. So one of the things that we want you to take home today to help everybody else at your organization use Yammer effectively is your group leaders have magic superpowers. It is not your job alone or the job of you and 2 or 3 other people in community management or IT to run the entire Yammer network. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. It's too much weight on your shoulders. The way that Yammer works is when you have teams, departments, divisions, and groups of people working together collaboratively. And there has to be somebody in charge, right? You have to have a captain of the football team. You have to have a teacher in front of the room. So all of these people who are out working in your organization, leading a marketing group, leading a division, they should be doing their work in Yammer and leading a group. So Kai, what is one, I know I called on you. What is one thing that managers do in email that they should do in Yammer instead?
Oh, there are many things. many things they shouldn't be doing. I think we see a lot of people sending out weekly newsletters. Do you see that? Monthly updates. They doing that. I don't think they should be doing that.
Okay, Scott?
Sending out performance reports. I think that goes much better through Yammer, not email. Much better.
Performance reports.
For the team, yeah, like where are we up to? If you're in a call center or something like that, like your average speed to answer, the number of calls that you reached. Putting that through Yammer actually inspires a whole swag of behaviours. When you put it out through email, it actually allows people to hide in the bushes. So I think putting that sort of stuff out through Yammer, not email, is infinitely more powerful.
There are probably hundreds, thousands of different ways that managers abuse email and abuse other ways of communicating. And one of the things that you can do if you want to help different managers take their work onto Yammer is, okay, we're going to set you up a group, and you're going to bring all of your team in, and you're going to start doing 1 or 2 things that you're already doing via email in this group. I'm not adding work to your plate. I'm not making you do something new. It's just, let's take it from here and put it over here. Those people who are the group leaders who are going to shift these processes into Yammer are going to start to experience how it improves their collaboration, and they're going to feel the change and the difference. And what we've noticed is instead of going out and doing this giant global re-engagement campaign to clean up everything in Yammer, the real work starts one team by one team by one team, and that's how it's going to scale. And we know that group leaders who have been coached by people who know what they're doing in Yammer, those teams are more than 40% more engaged in Yammer than teams that have not been coached. And that's something that we found in research with one of our clients, basically analyzing their engagement activity in Yammer versus the ones who didn't receive any coaching. So that's all you have to do. Help them shift behavior into Yammer as a leader of a group, and that'll start the engagement skyrocketing. Now, we're going to talk about something that's probably a very sore subject for many of you. Groups in Yammer and group sprawl. Raise your hand if you have more than 100 groups in your Yammer network, and keep them up. What if you have more than 500 groups? Keep your hand up. More than 1,000 groups in Yammer.
Still people with their hands up.
Still 5 people with their hands up. What about more than 2,000 groups in their Yammer? Okay, there's a little bit of sanity left on the planet. All right, so 2,000, we tap out around 1,500 groups. One of the beautiful things about Yammer is that anyone can create a group. And one of the most challenging things about Yammer is that anyone can create a group. Thank you, I knew that, you knew that's where I was going, right? I want you to think about cleaning up your Yammer groups as probably one of the single most important things that you can do to get people to engage or re-engage with Yammer. There's a lot of things we do that aren't fun that we have to clean up. What doesn't work if you don't clean it or you don't invest in keeping it nice and tidy?
Well, so I live in Australia, right? So if you don't put wax on your surfboard,
Okay,
it's going to cause problems over time.
okay. Scott?
I got a 14-month-old child, and so if I don't empty that nappy bin, I cannot get into that room.
If you don't empty the diaper bin, you can't be in the bedroom.
That's right.
It's like if you don't plow the driveway after it snows, you can't drive to work. If you don't do the laundry, you're going to end up not having any clothes, and that's not okay when you go to work. The same thing happens in Yammer. You need to take under a process of cleaning up these groups, and maybe not you doing the cleanup, but you making everybody else do it. So you know those group leaders that we just told you about? You want to make sure that they know when it's time to clean up their groups, and if they haven't done it, you do it for them. So there's a lot of different ways to create a group cleanup process. Once you've done it, now you have sort of an established norm for what's going to happen if groups aren't cleaned up. And so you can look at different criteria to decide which ones are we going to, make go away by putting a different naming convention to say that they're archived, or by promoting the groups that are official, creating sort of a group directory of the groups that have the right topics. You don't want marketing team 1 and marketing team 3. You want one group that's best practices for marketing and one group that's best practices for innovation, for example. So yeah.
I'm just thinking, Carrie, you can't really archive groups in Yammer, right? Which is probably why some of you keep having your hands up, because there's so many of them. What are there some practical things people can do to sort of, get around that problem that they can't be archived?
So one of the things that I've seen work really well is to, in front of a Yammer group that you no longer want to be used, you change the name to ZZZ or ZZZ for the Australians, ZZZ archive or ZZZ no longer in use. That actually pushes the group down to the bottom of the list of groups on your left-hand navigation pane so that it visually creates this place where, oh, I don't want to go there anymore. I've also seen it work where you take the images up top and you turn them to a certain color, so a darker color or a particular color that's not on brand for you, that visually people go, oh, I'm clearly not supposed to be here, or in the group avatar, a giant X or something that also visually signals we don't come to this group anymore. You definitely want to come up with a way of reaching out to these group leaders and saying it's time for you to either reinvigorate your group or make it go away and you archive it. It could be 60 days of inactivity, 90 days of inactivity. There's any variety of ways that you can go about it, and it will require some of your time up front. It's just, you gotta plow the driveway, you gotta do the laundry, but then after that, there will be a norm, and it will be much easier for others to help you with that cleanup effort.
So what you're saying is that those rules could be established by the people in the room, but all the work being shifted off to someone else.
That is correct. You can make the rules, you can be the playground monitor, but you don't have to do the work yourself. Once you've made the rules, then get everybody else to archive their own groups. If they don't do it, then yes, you might be on the hook to do that, or you may be able to get someone else to help you with admin rights to Yammer. But that's the idea, is make everybody follow your rules, and you don't have to do the work.
Now, one thing you might be asked is that, what does normal look like? You might think you have a very high-performing network or low-performing, and people say, well, enough, what is enough? How much is enough? So I want to show you some numbers that is in our recent, or most, actually it's formally come out today, our 2018 Yammer benchmarking study. And we looked at 1.4 million people and 12 billion interaction points on Yammer in 74 different organizations. And I want to give you some ideas about what we're seeing is sort of, normal. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying, well, this is sort of what normal looks like. So if you look at the pie chart over on the left-hand side, We know that there are some people, it's not appropriate for everyone to use Yammer. It could be that they're in a blue-collar role where they don't have got access, or everyone gets an Office 365 license, but it's just not the scope for them to use it. We also know there's a lot of people that are actually only consuming by reading content. So they're not brave enough yet to actually contribute to the conversations, but they read things. And then there's the people that are actually contributing. We sort of split them up into the ones that are very active and those that are sort of, coming every now and then. So that's just to give you some idea about what you can expect. If someone is saying to you, senior people, or everyone must be in Yammer all the time, I don't think that necessarily is what you should be looking for. So we look at this as the network effect. How many people does it actually take for a message to go viral? And there are some numbers around this. About 25% of people, you need to create a revolution, people saying. So if you have at least 25% sort of actively engaged, then you are in a position where you can really use Yammer as a business transformation tool. Also wanted to share with you some numbers about what happens in groups. Because if you're saying, well, like how active should groups be, or what's normal? So small groups are typically a lot more active than bigger groups, right? So we expect to see about 70% of people being active in a small group, but the bigger the group gets, the lower those numbers will automatically be. There'll be more and more people that are sort of on the gallery looking than actively contributing. So that's just to give you some overall, ideas about that. We often also being asked, well, so how much should I be using Yammer? Like, what is normal? What does good look like? And how much are other people doing it? So what we're seeing is that the second point there, 3 sentences, 229 characters, that's really the average length of a message on Yammer. So it's not necessarily very long. And that's exactly what we want. We don't want the long emails. That we want to take that and replicate that into Yammer. So better is shorter, much more frequent. We're also encouraging particularly senior leaders, when we're being asked how much they be doing, to do 2 posts, 4 replies, and 6 likes in a week. It's not hard and fast and chase that number, you're good, just to give you some idea about what is the kind of thing that would work. The reason why we want to have more replies and likes is obvious, right? Otherwise, I'm just broadcasting, having a one-way conversation if I'm just posting. So also having a sense of how many replies I'm making is actually really important to establish a conversation. And the likes is simply, especially for senior leaders, the impact it has when people are liking. When other people are being liked by a senior leader, it has tremendous impact.
And I would suggest on that note, one of the things I found, I actually coached 2 C-level leaders yesterday at a client on using Yammer. And what I found that leaders like with respect to this is little cheat sheets. So you could literally create a little half-page guide and put it in their office that says, how often do I post? What does a perfect post look like? To give them that visual cue and a guide for, oh, I don't have to write 500 words. Or, oh, I should be at mentioning people. Give them a little guide, put it in their office, and that's really going to help them remember these when they're posting to Yammer.
So if you want a little thing you can take back home with you, you can either take a photo of that or download the slides after the presentation as a little, we call it the 1, 2, 3 rule, as a really simple thing to remember. 1 post, 2 replies, 3 likes. And then you have sort of, you got the balance right in what you're doing. So it's not 3 posts and 0 likes, right? It's 1, 2, 3.
Thanks, Kjaer. So how many people here work in organisations that have other people in them? Yeah, most. Good. All right. Yeah, trick question. It's a very lonely Yammer community if you don't. Look, one of the things that we do to get some really big bang for buck is we look to run a number of campaigns or initiatives that have some sort of incentive attached. Now, whenever I come into organisations and I'm saying, we're going to run an incentive campaign, the first thing I get from people is we don't have any money for that. Well, that's okay, because quite often within our organisations, we already have incentives that are at play, and that's what I want to talk about now. So essentially what we talk about is that there's 4 different types of incentives. There's status, access, power, and stuff. So status is badges, putting people on the pedestal in some way. Access is like access to something scarce. So it could be dinner with the CEO or that queue at the airport that I'm yet to line up at. Power is power of self-determination, so being able to make decisions over others, and stuff is giveaways. Now, if you think about it, a lot of these things are already at play within our society, right? So if we want to disincentivise somebody, essentially we give them the status that's not particularly enjoyable, access to something they wish they didn't have access to, we take away their power and we take away their stuff. So this, as a framework, actually applies within our own personal worlds as well. Now, this actually goes from least effective to most, and why that's important is because those top 3 are usually free, right? So if you're looking at the things that status could be within our organisations, it could be like getting mentioned in an article, tagged by a C-suite, so any activities that your senior executive take actually carry more weight than anybody else. So I remember one day I was followed by the CEO of the company I was in at that point in time. I felt bulletproof for the rest of the day. Like it's a transactional currency that we can use to our advantage. Employee of the month, all these sorts of things. Access, dinner with the CEO, special training. We might be able to be the first people to get the new laptop in the organisation, right? These incentives are already at play. We want to use them to our advantage. Power, deciding on a process, contributing to strategy. The question one, like what is the dumbest thing we're doing in our organisation, is a lovely question to have a senior executive put into a Yammer community, which gives people the power to determine the things that they want to see solved. So these incentives work in numerous different ways. And the last one is stuff, giveaways. So when you're looking at when you're looking to build an incentive program, have a think. What are the status incentives that are already at play? What are the access? It could be around having a car park for a week, or having the office that's closer to the bathroom. I don't know. Whatever it is in your organisation, have a think about what's already at play and how can we use that to our advantage.
Now we have one final tip for you before we're going to take questions. So keep thinking of anything you want to ask us. You've got us trapped for another 14 minutes and 30 seconds. So any ideas or any questions you have, we're going to be happy to take them before we get to the very last tip that we have for how to make you a superhero and not do all of the work. So my favorite tip here with a great example that we'll share is be the idea guy or the idea gal, and then divide and conquer the work. So what that means is just because you have this great idea for how Yammer should be used in your organization doesn't mean you have to do it, right? You might have a great idea because you've seen it in another organization, you've heard us talk about it, you've met with another community manager that's operationalized a process in Yammer. Take that back to your organization and have somebody else do the work, do your bidding. If you're the idea person, you're still going to be getting credit for, wow, he or she is so great with these ideas, and people are going to come to you for inspiration, and then they're going to leave your cube, and you're going to get to go about your day, and they're going to go onto Yammer. Here's a really good example of how this actually worked. We had a pharma client last year, almost exactly a year ago, with Hurricane Irma. And somebody in IT, of course, very busy, overworked, as all IT folks are, go, you know what? We just heard an idea from somebody organically that we should be creating an employee-to-employee home share program because we have a lot of centers that are getting evacuated. So how can we create sort of this employee home sharing experience? Because I have a house, I could put somebody up. And within 18 hours, the people who thought of that idea created a cross-functional group of people to actually operationalize it using Yammer for the conversation. So the customer built out their very own private Airbnb map where people could submit their address, how many people that they could accommodate, their phone number and contact information, and those all appeared on the map. That's what IT did. Then the communications group, the group that I was working with, came in and said, we're going to then take this information and broadcast it out to the rest of the organization, and we'll manage a Yammer group to help peers connect with each other when maybe they can't find something on the map fast enough. So an entire cross-functional team came together over the course of 18 hours, and more than 200 people offered to share their home with more than 450 beds. So this is something where one person had an idea, but they didn't have the ability to do the work themselves, but they brought it together and used Yammer as a piece of this program, and then they got the credit for being this fantastic sort of socially conscious group of people at their organization. So a fantastic example of helping other people do the work and understanding where Yammer fits into a broader initiative and perspective. So I think we are ready for questions.
Yeah.
Does anyone have anything that they would like us to see? I'm doing exactly what I'm not supposed to do.
Yes, do you have any questions?
Do you have any questions? Yes.
Really great ideas, thank you. Our major problem is
drive those. So the question was around senior leadership involvement and examples around the profit, revenue and legacy. So that's the first one, and some examples. So the one I talked about before was the CFO, sitting down with the CFO and asking what keeps you up at night. And his biggest thing was around hemorrhaging working capital, and it was sending them broke. So as soon as I knew that there was a pain there, and it was a measurable pain, I was able to build a campaign around it. And I said to him, well, what if I can use this to drive that outcome? And he was all ears. So, because one of the big things that leaders have is they're like, I'm too busy, I don't have, this is another thing. But as soon as I can link it to the things that they are either feeling most under the pump for or are on the hook for to reaching their own bonuses, they're all like, they'll make time for it. HR people quite often have to build capabilities. So I had one that was looking to embed design thinking across the organisation. And I said, look, you're doing all this great training here, but when people finish training, it dissipates. You've got no momentum behind this community. Why don't we use this technology to form a community around design thinking, and everybody that goes to the training then gets added to it. We can put their materials in there so they can then go to it. And suddenly they had purpose for it. So much like Carrie was talking about, lifting the existing workload and dumping it in there. But when you're working with senior executives, they're slightly different. If you go to them talking about collaboration, they'll glaze over, or they'll tell you they like it, but then they'll never do anything about it. But if you tell the senior, like the HR person, if you hammer them about retention, because you know that's a pain point, and you talk about engagement through this to minimise retention, it's a different conversation. It takes it away from being a Yammer conversation into a retention conversation. And that's what we want. We want it to be, this to be the sort of the Trojan horse, or, you know, the business outcomes become the Trojan horse in which Yammer is used.
And then I want to add to that too really quick. The other thing, this goes along the lines of making the cheat sheet for leaders. You know, they're busy, they have a lot going on in their head, and Yammer, collaboration, communication, there's a lot going on for them to process. And I found that sitting down with them and in sort of a one-on-one setting on the device that they prefer to use, whether that's their computer, their iPad, their phone, whatever it might be, saying, you know what, in addition to talking about these bigger themes and what you already do, let's figure out one thing that you can do over the course of 5 minutes a day or over the course of 1 week. I'm not asking you to commit to 5 hours a week in Yammer. I'm asking you to commit to one tiny little, very specific thing. The more specificity you can give them to show them what it feels like on their device when they are going to participate makes it easier for them to understand, because I think a lot of times they just don't quite know what it feels like to do that in a community. So make it as real as you can. Yes. So the question is, how do you go through a group's cleanup process, maybe the inactive groups, without sort of making the owners angry? You're going to make people angry. It's a bit of a rip off a Band-Aid moment. And I think that, and I've seen this before, and I think that there's two roads that you can go down. When you do this, you connect to the group leader. Let's say the group has been inactive for 90 days, 120 days. There's probably a reason. So you can go to the group leader and say, this group is, you know, we'd like to shut this down. It's something that doesn't need to be here. It's sort of cluttering Yammer. We'd love to invite you to sort of reinvigorate this group over the next 2 weeks or 30 days. But if you don't, then we're going to go ahead and archive it. If they don't respond to you, I think that's signal that they're not going to do it. If they say, yeah, sure, we're going to start doing Ask Me Anythings and this, and then they start doing it, great. They can keep their group. But if they don't respond to you, and if they get angry and they don't want to do the work, that's really sort of behavior that I would like to discourage. So I think that the one-on-one outreach might be a bit of a burden time-wise, but I think that that's going to be your fastest signal from them on whether or not they're actually invested in this group.
You can always put that message in the group as well. So perhaps other members of the group find value in it and they're willing to take it forward. So it can happen. Quite often people feel very protective of their groups, don't they? Even though they've retired them in their own world, they're not really using them. So you do expect to get some emotional reaction. But if we're transparent around how we delete and the criteria of why it's been deleted as well, like you want to educate people through that process so it's not a surprise or something that's been just slammed down from IT. So make them part of that decision as much as you can, but someone has to make the hard decision.
I guess, Carrie, your trick about putting ZZZ means that it's not really being deleted, right? It's sort of, and that means it can be revived at a later stage if that momentum builds again.
That's right. We have time for one more question and 2 more questions if anyone has anything.
or abuse.
Abuse?
Yeah.
Oh, just for Scott.
Do you have any suggestions on how to increase user participation in a manufacturing facility where the users look at Yammer as a big waste of time?
We only have 6 minutes. The question, the question was around how to get Yammer users in a manufacturing facility to be engaged with Yammer when they look at it and they think that it's a waste of time. Do you?
Last year up on stage, I was lucky enough to be presenting with Mars, the chocolate pet food company, and they had some instructional videos that they had uploaded to SharePoint. But then they had communities for building that were like truck drivers, or they were moving things around the warehouse for how to use the equipment. So it's a place you can go to learn more about how to use a piece of equipment, or access training, or ask people. And I think that makes it very relevant to that person in that particular job. It wasn't about, even though we've heard from lots of organizations that there's a group about cycling or photography or things like that, and some of those people might not be interested in that. But if it's something that's really related to their work, and I'd imagine in a manufacturing plant there will be lots of health and safety and training and things, quick use of equipment. So that might be an idea to check out the presentation from Mars last year and just see how they've used Yammer in that environment.
I think the equipment one's a big one for that, particularly if you've got breakdowns or product information, that can be quite useful. The other thing I've seen work really well in similar context to that is using it to put in staff rosters, so they've got a reason to go there, and potentially talking around shift changes through that as an initial starting process as well. I've seen that work really well. Again, if you look at the things or the problems they're facing and they're trying to solve, and then you build out a solution that addresses those, that actually then makes it.
Just imagine a question that comes from the head of manufacturing asking people, what could we do better? Like what problems do we have, or something that's, I don't understand the context, but a question that comes from a senior leader about how they can help them getting things done better. I think that's not about using Yammer. I think Scott made the point, it's not with the senior executive, it's not about, we're not building a case actually for using Yammer, we're building a case for getting problem solved using it. And it's just a different perspective you take to it.
In any audience.
Right.
There was a question. It's a really tough question. So the question is, how do you, we've got now strong Teams adoption and Yammer's dropping, how do you actually give Yammer relevance within the context of that, right? And I think this is kind of where we're up to at the moment in terms of, well, I think anyway, this is the sort of the cutting edge of communications. There's a couple of things. I think what you find often is that the senior executive have more value out of the outer loop than they do the inner. I mean, they do for their own team, but that's where they're going to get organisational-wide change. So I'd be tapping on the door of the senior executive team as a starting point to pursue their agenda using that technology. But we're also in this period of flux at the moment. Like mentally, I cannot understand why there are still factories in the world cranking out faxes, but there is, right? What we see as new technologies come along is that their use becomes narrowed and more defined, and that's why we're never going to see the end of email, but its use will become more defined. The same will happen with Teams, the same will happen with Yammer. We just happen to be in that period of flux, but my advice would be to start with a
Yesterday there was an MVP panel, and there were 5 really smart people up on the stage. It was a session facilitated by Scott. And I think Mel Hohertz from Cargill said, if the question was ever, who would know about this? That is a question where it's actually not so the people that are in the team, they all know, like each other. Typically, if it's not, maybe not with 5,000 people, but the power of Yammer is to go across the organization. Yeah. So if I actually don't know who I'm going to be talking to, it's a very powerful tool.
And there's some data out there too, out of MIT, and a variety of other HBR articles I'm sure you can find that studies have been done that show that the optimal size of a team of people collaborating on a project is between 4 and 10, some say up to 15. If you're going to put 200 people or 50 people in a department in a team,
It's not really.
it's not going to work very well. It's going to be overloaded with noise. And so the data does show that if that's kind of your upper limit for where you want to use that for collaboration.
Their pain will become evident over time.
Right.
So sometimes we just let people feel that pain for a while and then solve it.
Now, we all love to chat, also with you, but we're looking at the clock. We've got about 60 seconds left. So I think we should just say thank you to everyone for coming along. Thank you very much. Given that this has been recorded, we'd very much welcome a ridiculously loud applause afterwards. And
Throwing
come
emojis.
up and have a chat with us. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.